A judge hurls an insult at Pam Bondi in the middle of a public hearing. Moments later, she turns the tables and has him restrained in handcuffs. What unfolded next will leave you stunned. Pam Bondi was no stranger to high-stakes battles. She had carved her path through years of grueling legal warfare, tackling some of the nation's most formidable cases, yet today carried a distinct edge. Stepping into the domain of Judge Howard Gates, a figure notorious for his biting remarks and erratic judgments, she sensed this wouldn't be a routine session. The matter before them was an explosive government ethics scandal, one poised to topple more than just a handful of reputations. The accused, a rich developer with powerful political connections, stood charged with siphoning public funds into his personal ventures. Pam Bondi arrived armed with a mountain of proof, but nothing could have braced her for the venom seeping from the judge's perch. Before she could utter a single syllable, Judge Gates scarcely lifted his gaze as Pam Bondi neared the plaintiff's desk. Instead, he leafed through a dossier with exaggerated leisure, forcing the room into a stillness. Not the usual courtroom pause, but a heavy quiet crafted to assert dominance. At last, without meeting her eyes, he drawled, "Miss Bondi, I trust you've brought something worth hearing today, or are we jumping straight to the part where you squander my patience?" Snickers echoed from the rear, mostly from the defendant's legal crew. Pam Bondi brushed them off. She'd endured far worse. "Your Honor, the evidence will stand on its own merit. This case hinges on the theft of public money, and my duty is to lay out the truth plainly." Judge Gates reclined in his seat, feigning disinterest. "Public money, you say, as if that hasn't been the flimsy excuse for baseless claims before." Pam Bondi's teeth clenched, though her voice remained even. "With respect, Your Honor, I'd argue felony corruption allegations are far from trivial." Their eyes locked briefly. His icy and shrewd, hers resolute. But before she could press on, he sliced through again. "Mrs. Bondi, save me the sermon. Cut to the chase. I'm not here all day to indulge whatever theatrics you've rehearsed." Whispers stirred in the gallery. The room wasn't overflowing, but those present perked up, detecting an unusual tension. Judges could be stern, but this felt like a personal jab. Pam drew a measured breath, steadying herself. She saw his game. Gates aimed to throw her off, to dictate the rhythm and corner her into retreat. But she refused to hand him that victory. She lifted a folder from her table and cracked it open. "Your Honor, I'd like to draw the court's focus to Exhibit A. These records unmistakably reveal—" "Miss Bondi," Gates broke in, his tone soaked in mockery. "Must you always bury us in documents, or is this your way of masking something?" The barb hit its mark. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The defense lawyer grinned. A few journalists swapped looks. Yet Pam Bondi stood firm. She'd long ago learned that men like Gates fed on fear. The trick was to never show a crack. She lingered just long enough to let her silence speak, then placed the folder down and folded her hands. "Your Honor, if you'd rather keep this personal, I'm content to call for a break so we can sort out any professional grievances you might harbor." It was understated. Not hostile, not insolent, but sharp. A quiet signal she wouldn't buckle. The judge's mouth twitched faintly. Amusement? Irritation? Hard to pin down. But he wasn't finished. "Oh, I've no grievances, Miss Bondi. I simply recognize a flimsy case when it's dangled before me." This time it wasn't just murmurs. Gasps broke out. A hushed comment floated nearby. This wasn't judicial conduct as anyone knew it. Pam felt the room's gravity tilting, gazes ping-ponging between her and Gates like a live match, but she wouldn't stoop to a shouting contest. That's what he craved. Instead, she smoothed her blazer, aligned her papers, and met his stare head-on. "Then, let's allow the facts to take the stage." As she spoke, she spotted a glint in his demeanor. Not mere pride, not just disdain. Something more, a hint of a man with skin in this fight. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just courtroom drama. Judge Gates wasn't sparring for kicks. He was guarding a secret. What he didn't suspect was that she held one too. Pam Bondi had weathered countless nerve-wracking hearings, but this was a breed apart. Judge Gates wasn't merely presiding. He was orchestrating a calculated assault to discredit her before the whole chamber. Why, though? She sensed his glare tracking her every point. With each sentence, he poised to strike. She could almost feel it, the faint smirk, the deliberate drumming of his fingers on the bench, daring her to push forward. She had no intention of backing down. "Your Honor," she said, her voice controlled, "these papers expose a glaring gap in the funding breakdown. The defendant's firm pocketed nearly 3 times the budgeted sum, with zero trace in state logs." She angled toward the screen, pointing to the projected financials. "If you'll look here—" "Miss Bondi," Gates interjected, his smugness thick, "I'd hate to derail your little show, truly, but I think we've had our fill of digits for now." Pam Bondi flicked her eyes to him, then back to the display. He wasn't bothering to mask it anymore. "Your Honor, with all due respect, these figures anchor the entire case." "Sure," he sneered, "and still I see nothing worth dragging this court through." That phrase again, wasting time. He was bearing this before it could breathe. A faint shuffle sounded behind her. The prosecution team stirring, trading glances. They sensed it too. Something was askew. Pam Bondi's grip on her pen tightened as she turned to the next page. "Your Honor, I'd like to propose a motion to—" "Rejected." Silence fell. She looked up. "I haven't even outlined it yet." Gates leaned forward, elbows on the bench. "And I can already tell it's dead on arrival. Face it, Miss Bondi, this whole thing's a house of cards, some clever bookkeeping spun into a corruption tale." The defense attorney, a middle-aged man in navy, smirked. He hadn't uttered a peep. Gates was carrying the load. Pam Bondi exhaled steadily. "Your Honor, are you dismissing my motion without knowing what it entails?" A pause stretched too long. "I'm done humoring this farce." The courtroom wasn't merely on edge now. It was alive. Eyes darted, heads swiveled. Reporters scribbled furiously. Pam Bondi caught a juror's look, a woman in her 50s, dark blazer, brow creased, lips tight. She wasn't alone in noticing. Arrogance has a way of sharpening focus. Pam Bondi straightened up. "Fine, Your Honor. Let's move to the next exhibit." She clicked to the next slide. "This paper, secured via subpoena, proves that—" "Miss Bondi." His tone shifted, something new. She halted, met his gaze. Judge Gates wasn't slouched anymore, his smug mask gone. Hands clasped, mouth a rigid line. A change had crept in. "Come to the bench." It wasn't optional. She paused, set her notes aside, and approached. The room stilled. At the bench, he dropped his voice so only she heard. "I'd advise you to rethink where you're steering this, Miss Bondi." She tilted her head. "Pardon?" "I'm telling you," he hissed low, "some battles aren't worth picking." She let his words hang, then leaned in a fraction, deliberate. "I don't spook easily, Judge Gates." His jaw muscle flickered. She turned and strode back, but that exchange laid it bare. Pam Bondi settled back in, her thoughts racing. That wasn't just a flex. It was a caution. A veiled jab cloaked as judicial weight. But why? She'd expected resistance, perhaps animosity, but this ran deeper. Gates wasn't just partial, he was shielding something. Or someone. She neatened her papers, face impassive. Her team shifted beside her, awaiting a cue. She held off, for now. Instead, she raised her chin and faced him. "Your Honor, I'd like to resume with my evidence." Gates didn't reply at once. He let the quiet stretch, weighing how far to press. Then, "Go ahead. Make it quick." Pam Bondi ignored the dig. She reached for the next file. This is a deal inked between the defendant and the city's planning board, detailing project costs. Note the total, just over $2 million. She paused, then slid another sheet onto the projector with precision. Yet, this internal record from the defendant's firm shows funds nearly doubling that figure. She laid down a third page. And here's the sign-off, authorized by, she stopped, letting the moment sink in. Judge Howard Gates. The room didn't just stir, it fractured. A wave of motion, eyes flashing, pens racing. The defense attorney froze, his smirk erased. Judge Gates sat still. For the first time since she'd entered, his expression was a blank slate. Pam Bondi let the hush linger, then pressed on. Your Honor, care to clarify why your name's tied to an unapproved money trail with the defendant? A bold gamble. She didn't have every piece yet, but this was enough to rattle his footing. Gates shifted at last, fingers laced, knuckles paling. That paper, he said slowly, doesn't hold water. Pam Bondi cocked her head. Why not? It's legally sourced. She let it settle. Your Honor, my office subpoenaed this. His nostrils flared. Then it's tainted. I'm deeming it inadmissible. It's out of this court's scope. The shift wasn't just in the gallery now, it was total. Jury, stenographer, bailiff, all eyes locked on. Pam Bondi crossed her arms, voice cool. You know this is a public session, right? The press is here. Everyone just watched you toss out key financial proof without cause. His jaw twitched. Enough, Miss Bondi. She didn't budge, didn't flinch. Then, slowly, she sat. And that's when she flipped the script. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small recorder, set it on the table, and hit play. A voice cut through. Gruff, distinct, undeniable. Handle it. I don't care how. Static hissed. Then, keep those ledgers out of her reach. Silence. Thick, choking silence. Judge Gates didn't stir, didn't breathe. Pam Bondi didn't glance his way. She didn't have to. Every soul in that room had heard him now, and the true showdown was just beginning.